Okay, so this is 3.6 part 2. So we're just pretty much doing the same thing we were doing yesterday, just a little bit different. So today we are graphing a system of quadratic inequalities. So we are given two inequalities, we need to graph them both, and then what's in common is going to be our answer. So let's go ahead and start with our top one. So to find our vertex, I'm just looking at this one here. To find our vertex, first we need to find the axis of symmetry. What is our B here? 0. So we would have negative 0 over 2 times negative 1, which is what? 0. Anytime we have a 0 on top, 0. So that means our x in our vertex is 0. And then how do we find our y in our vertex? The axis of symmetry formula, negative b over 2a. Remember, our b is what's in front of the x term. So we have a times x squared plus b times x plus c. So do we have an x term here? No. So since there's no x term, that would mean our b is 0. So that's how we got 0. So then, how do we find what our y point in our vertex is? Plug it in. So when we plug in 0, what do we get? 3. So let's graph it. So we stay on 0 and go up 3. So that's 1 point. What can we do to find another point? Just plug in numbers. So we can plug in 1. So when x is equal to 1, we plug that in. So y is equal to negative 1 squared plus 3. So negative 1 plus 3. So y is what? 2. So when x is 1, y is 2. We go to the right 1 and up 2. And we have the same exact point on the other side. Perfect. Now that we have our 3 points, we can go ahead and graph our parabola. Is this going to be a solid line parabola or a dotted line? A dotted line because we have just a less than sign. So this is going to be a dotted line. Alright, so that's the first one. Now we can move on to our second one. We're going to do the same thing. First, let's find our axis of symmetry. So we have negative b over 2a. What is our b here? 2. So we have negative 2 over 2 times 1. So this would be negative 1. We get negative 2 over 2, which simplifies to negative 1. So our x in our vertex is negative 1. How do we find our y? Plug it in. So we have negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 3. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. 2 times negative 1 is minus 2 and minus 3. So what is 1 minus 2 minus 3? Negative 4. So our vertex is at negative 1, negative 4. So we go to the left 1 and down 4. And put our point there. What was your question? Okay, we need another point here. Do we have our y-intercept just by looking at our equation? Remember, we can plug in 0 to find our y-intercept, and what would that be? -3. Our C is always where our graph crosses the y-axis. So our graph is going to cross at -3. So we can put our point there. Now that we have a point on the right side, we have a point on the left side in the same spot. And now that we have 3 points, we can put our parabola. Is it a solid line or a dotted line? Solid line. One thing that I forgot to do in the first one is find out where it's shaded. How do I find out where we're going to shade our graph? Plug in anything inside. So what's 1 point inside of our pink parabola? 0, 1. What about 0, 0? That's probably the easiest point we could plug in. So let's plug in 0, 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y and 0 for x. But yeah, we could have plugged in 0, 1, 2. We could plug in anything inside of our parabola. But if you see the origins inside of your parabola, it's easiest just to plug in 0, 0, because then it's less math you have to do. So we have 0 is less than 3. Is this true? Yes. So are we going to shade the inside or outside? Inside. So we shade the inside for the pink one. Now we need to pick a point inside the blue one. We can pick 0, 0 again. So I have 0 in for y is greater than or equal to 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 3. So 0 is greater than or equal to -3. Is this true? Yeah, 0 is bigger than -3. So that's true. So where am I going to shade? The inside. It's just what we were doing before, but now we have like 2 problems in one. Well, we're not done yet. So our answer here is actually just the purple part. So everything that's in common is going to be our answer. So we would erase everything in blue that's outside, because all we're looking at is what's in common. So it's just the purple part. My eraser's too big for this, but it's fine. So our answer is just the purple part. So our graph of this system is just our shaded purple part here. Any questions here? No questions? So it's really exactly what we were doing yesterday, but it's 2 problems in one, and we just take the common part. Okay, so the next one says graph the system of inequalities consisting of y is less than or equal to -x squared and y is greater than x squared minus 3. So this is going to be our first graph. And then this is our second one. So let's start with graphing our first one. So how do we find our axis of symmetry in the first graph? What's our b in the first graph? 0. So this is just 0. If we have a 0 on top, our answer is 0. So then when x is 0 for our vertex, what would y be when we plug in 0 for x? 0. So our vertex is at 0, 0. Now how do we find more points in our graph? Plug in numbers. So what can we plug in? Let's plug in 1. So we're plugging in 1 for x, so y is equal to negative 1 squared. 1 squared is 1, but we have that negative on the outside, so this is negative 1. So another point, yes? So if we're plugging in, okay, so the question was, how do we know if the negative's on the outside or the inside? That's a good question. If we're plugging in a number, like let's say we were if we had this one here, and we were plugging in a negative 1, that would mean that it would be on the inside. So we're plugging in the negative, and it's on the inside, so that's negative is squared. If it's ever written without parentheses, and it's on the outside, like this, we know that negative is not getting squared, it's just the x that's getting squared. That negative is on the outside. So when we plug in numbers, that negative gets squared, but here, that negative's on the outside.
So like if you were to plug in negative 1, would it make it into positive?
No, because if we plugged in a negative 1, that negative 1 is our x, so that's what gets squared. What's negative 1 squared? Positive 1, but we still have that negative attached on the outside. So that's a good question. Okay, so we can plot this point. We said we have 1, negative 1, so we go to the right 1 and down 1. Do we have another point on our graph? The same thing on the other side, right? This point. Now that we have 3 points, we can draw our parabola. Do we put a dotted line or a solid line? Solid. Okay, now let's see where we're going to shade. What point can we plug in here? What point? Is 0, 0 inside of our parabola? 0, negative 1. So it has to be somewhere inside here that we're going to test. And it can't be on the line, because then that doesn't tell if we're shading inside or outside, because everything on the line is going to work. So let's plug in 0, negative 1. So we plug in negative 1 for y. So negative 1 is less than or equal to negative 0 squared. So this is negative 1 is less than or equal to 0. Is this true? Yes. Yes, negative 1 is less than 0. So do we shade on the inside or outside? Inside. All right, let's move on to the blue. So first, let's find our axis of symmetry to graph. What's our B here? What? 0. So we have 0 over 2, which is just 0. So our x in our axis of symmetry is 0. How do we find our y? Plug it in. So our y is going to be 0 squared minus 3. So 0 minus 3, which is negative 3. So we're going to stay at 0 and go down 3. That's our vertex. Now, how do we find more points on our graph? plug in numbers. So let's plug in 1. So y is going to be equal to 1 squared minus 3. So this is 1 minus 3, which is what? Negative 2. So we go to the right 1 and down 2. And do we have another point? Same thing on the other side. Now that we have 3 points, we can graph it. Do we have a solid line or a dotted line? Dotted line. So I'm going to draw our little dotted parabola. Now we need to test a point. We can test 0, 0 since 0, 0 is on the inside. So we're going to plug in 0 for y and 0 for x. So we get 0 is greater than negative 3. Is this true? Is 0 greater than negative 3?
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So are we going to shade on the inside or the outside? Inside. But we only keep the parts that are in common. We only keep the purple parts. So we have pink and blue. So we only keep the purple. So we erase everything else. So only the purple part is what gets shaded. Any questions here? I think this section's so fun because you get to color. Okay, so next we're going to be solving quadratic inequalities algebraically. So when we see an inequality like this, that is greater than or equal to or greater than or less than or equal to 0, we change that inequality to equal 0 and we solve. So we have x squared minus 3x minus 4 is equal to 0. And we solve it just as we would from the last sections. So what are two factors of negative 4 that add up to negative 3? Negative 4 and 1. Perfect. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. So we're going to put those in our parentheses. We have x minus 4 and x plus 1 is equal to 0. What do we do next from here? Separate them, make them both equal to 0. So x minus 4 is equal to 0. X plus 1 is equal to 0. So what do we get for x? X is positive 4 and x is negative 1. Alright, so now that we found our two things our two numbers when it's equal to 0, we're going to put those numbers on a number line. So we have 0 in the middle of our number line. We can say negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have our number line here. We're going to put a dot at 0 and a dot at negative 1. Sorry, we're going to put a dot at negative 1 and a dot at 4. So we just need to put a dot at both of these x's that we found. Now going back to our inequality up at the top, we're going to pick a section from our number line. So we're going to pick the left side, we're going to test the middle, and then we're going to test the right side, and we're going to see what works. So we're going to pick any number from the left side of our dots and plug that into x back at the top. So here, I'll make a little side note for you guys. We pick a number and plug back in. So what can we pick to the left? We can pick negative, what did you say? Negative 2. So we're going to test negative 2 on our pink side. So we have negative 2 squared minus 3 times negative 2 minus 4 is less than 0. Gianna, what's negative 2 squared? 4. And then negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6 minus 4. So we get 6 is less than 0. Is this true? No. So this side does not work. Now we need to test a number in the middle. What can we pick in the middle? Let's pick 0. So we have 0 squared minus 3 times 0 minus 4 is less than 0. So we have negative 4 is less than 0. Does this work? Yes. So the middle works. So now let's test a number to the right. What can we test to the right? 5. So we have 5 squared minus 3 times 5 minus 4 is less than 0. 5 squared is 25 minus 15 minus 4 is less than 0. So this is 25 minus 19 is less than 0, which is 6 is less than 0. Is this true? Nope. So this does not work. So the only thing that works is the middle. So we would shade our middle part here. So in the book, how we would write our answer, so anywhere from negative 1 to 4 works. So we would say x is from negative 1 to 4, so we would write that as negative 1 is less than x, which is less than 4. And how do we know it's just a less than, not less than or greater to? How do we know we just put less than and not less than or greater, or less than or equal to? Because we didn't start off with a equal to. So our inequality in the beginning was not equal to, so then our answers are not going to be equal to.
Wait, so negative 4, so the one I circled at the bottom?
Yep.
The answer?
Yeah. So this would be our answer here. Okay, so we're doing the same thing for this one. Where do we start? We put it equal to 0. So we're finding our zeros here. Do we have two factors of 9 that add up to 10? 9 and 1. So then in our parentheses here, we're going to have x plus 9 and x plus 1. What do we do from here? Equal them both to 0. So x plus 9 is equal to 0. X plus 1 is equal to 0. What are we going to get for x? Negative 9, and x is equal to negative 1. So we're going to put those on our number line. I'm going to put negative 1 here, then we have 0, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7, negative 8, negative 9, negative 10. So now we need to test a number outside to the left of negative 9 and a number in the middle and a number to the right of negative 1. So what should we test first? Negative 10. So we have negative 10 squared plus 10 times negative 10 plus 9 is less than 0. What is negative 10 squared? 100. And then 10 times negative 10 is minus 100 plus 9. So we get 9 is less than 0. Is this true? No. So the left side does not work. We're not going to be shading over there. Now let's pick a number in between. What's a number we can pick in the middle? Negative 2? Perfect. We like the smaller numbers to work with. It means less math. So we have negative 2 squared plus 10 times negative 2 plus 9 is less than 0. Negative 2 squared is 4 plus negative 2 times 10. So this becomes a minus 20 plus 9 is less than 0. So this is negative 7 is less than 0. Is this true? Yep. So the middle part works, so we can shade in the middle there. And now let's just check the outside on the right side. So what can we plug in on the outside to the right? 0. So 0 squared plus 10 times 0 plus 9 is less than 0. So 9 is less than 0. Does this work? No. So then how would we write our answer here? X can be anything from negative 9 to 1. So x goes from negative 9 to negative 1. So this is our answer. Any questions here? All right, we have one more example just like this one. Ready for the next? Okay. What should we do first here? Move the 10. We always want it to be our inequality and then 0. We want 0 on one side of our equation, so we're going to move the 10. So we have 3x squared minus 13x plus 10 is greater than 0. What do we do next? Make it equal to 0. And then we need to find the zeros. So what do we do when our first number out front is not 1? Multiply it to the 10, but yes, we multiply our first and last terms together. So 30. Do we have two factors of 30 that add to negative 13? Negative 3 and negative 10? Yep, that works.
Could you also do 15 and negative 2?
What is 15 times negative 2? Negative 30. Are we looking for a negative 30? No. So that would not work. So that was a good guess. Just wouldn't work. So we're going to put x minus 3 times x minus 10. Am I forgetting a step? We have to divide both of our numbers by 3. We simplify if it goes in evenly, so x minus 1 is our first parentheses. If it does not go in evenly, we move it in front of the x. So this is 3x minus 10. And now we solve just as we would before. So x minus 1 is equal to 0. 3x minus 10 is equal to 0. We add 1 to both sides, so x is equal to 1. We add 10 on both sides here, and then divide by 3, so x is equal to 10 over 3. Now we put these on our number line. So I'm going to put 1, 0, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where on our number line do you think 10 over 3 goes? Between 3 and 4. 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1 left over, so it would be about 3 1/3. So we would put our dot right there. So this is 10 over 3. And then we would put another dot at 1. Now I put open circles just because our inequality that we started with is just a greater than sign and doesn't have an equal to attached. So I'm just making a note there that I put open circles because I'm not including the 1 and the 10 over 3. Alright, so now I test my numbers. What can I test first? 0, so let's plug in 0. I'm going to plug it back into the original here. So I have 3 times 0 squared minus 13 times 0 is greater than negative 10. So this is 0 is greater than negative 10. This is true. So I'm going to highlight on the outside. Next, let's test one in the middle. What's a number in the middle that we can try? 2. So we have 2 squared times 3 minus 13 times 2 is greater than negative 10. 2 squared is 4 times 3 is 12 minus 13 times 2 is 26. 12 minus 26 is negative 14. Is negative 14 greater than negative 10? Nope, so this does not work in the middle. Now let's try the outside. What's a number on the outside we can try? 4. So we have 4 squared times 3 minus 13 times 4 is greater than negative 10. 4 squared is 16. What is 16 times 3? 48.
What? 60?
16 times 3.
No, I was gonna say 48 was you all.
48, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, tripping.
You said 16, bro.
Now I'm about to say 68.
Alright, and now 13 times 4 is 52. So 48 minus 52 is what? Negative 4. Is negative 4 greater than negative 10? So then we shade on the outside too. So here, we would write our answer as x is less than 1 and x is greater than 10 over 3. So for this one, we would just write our answers as this. When it's on the outsides, you can't combine them together. So we would just have two inequalities here. So x is less than 1 and x is greater than 10 over 3. So when it's on the outsides, we can't combine our two inequalities together. Only when it's on the inside, we would write it as one inequality.